Chapter 1486. Haxord ultimately chose to cooperate. Even though it wasn't difficult to conclude that this was the most logical course of action as long as one thought about it rationally, when they saw the senior demon lord being convinced by a young witch and retracting his opinion, they still felt their chests swell and they couldn't help but raise their heads slightly. Sky Lord's only request was to confirm that the situation was as Anna had described, which she had agreed to. Under the layers of surveillance of the gods' punishment witches, Haxord and Sarakas saw Roland lying on the bed. The pillar of light around him was still as majestic as before, nearly covering half the floating island. If it were half a year earlier, I would definitely be very happy to see this scene. Haxord kept the 5-colored magic stone and sighed. Have you attempted to connect to the dream world? Of course, but it didn't work. Phyllis answered him. Our souls are no longer accepted by that world, and our companions who entered ahead of us have fallen into a deep slumber. This makes it impossible for us to transmit any information to His Majesty. The connection between the two worlds has been severed. On the bright side, he has at least 2 witches accompanying him. Haxord shrugged his shoulders and said to Anna, the Western Front project has been going on for nearly 100 years. In order to transport the Red Mist, which is also known as the Red Mist, from the Blackstone region to the human territories, it not only includes a birth tower, but also a passageway hidden in the mountains. And the exit of this passageway is just a mountain away from Everwinter's northern territory. Therefore, sending your reinforcements to the bottomless land doesn't require me to repeatedly travel. If you are willing to take the risk, I can help you open this distortion door. That's good. Anna nodded and said, I believe that with Silent Disaster escorting us along the way, your people wouldn't mind us using this shortcut. It was undoubtedly a bold suggestion to have a Grand Lord suppress the other devils who were ready to make trouble. The others could not help but break out into a cold sweat, but Haxord chuckled. Interesting young lady. I don't have any objections as long as it agrees. Sarakas took off her ferocious black helmet, revealing a head full of long hair that didn't match her appearance. Her extremely feminine face left those who had never seen her true appearance astonished. It sized up Anna for a moment before saying, I have a condition. When you bring Roland deep into the bottomless land, I want to enter as well. Is it because of the Nightmare Lord? Anna asked bluntly. Sarakas did not reply. I promise you, she finally said solemnly. After receiving an affirmative answer, Silent Disaster wore her helmet again and walked out of the bedroom. It was evident that it had no intention of interfering with the concrete plans to be discussed later. Haxord seemed to be used to his style of doing things. Let's change the venue to discuss how to head to the fog island occupied by the Skysea realm. Not long after arriving at the base, Roland and Valkyries were invited into a large hall by the receptionist. There were already quite a number of peers in the hall, but most of them were gathered at the back. As for him, he was directly led to the front row. The person sitting beside him was rather familiar. It was the celebrity martial artist genius, Fei Yuhan. After learning that he was unable to leave the dream world, Roland was much calmer than he expected. Or rather, he was mentally prepared for the fact that the Oracle would not let the matter rest. If he were in Neverwinter, he might have some worries, but now that the greatest threat to humanity, the Demon King's city, had been destroyed, and the floating island controlled by Eleanor was isolated from the outside world. Even if he were to remain unconscious, it would not affect the situation too much. All he needed to do was to seize the time and get rid of the Oracle that was causing trouble in the dark. The 3 of them exchanged simple greetings. Although they only exchanged a few words, Roland could sense that Valkyries treated Fei Yuhan much better than he did. When did a senior lord and a celebrity martial artist become so close? He had clearly been providing Peninsula coffee all this while. A few minutes later, Defender Rock walked into the hall. Everyone, we have a problem. His opening words immediately caused everyone to quieten down. Following that, Rock pressed the control pen in his hand, and several photos were projected onto the wall behind him. Upon seeing the contents of the photos, everyone simultaneously inhaled a breath of cold air. Several bright red holes appeared on the streets of the city. They were of varying sizes, with the large ones nearly splitting a building in half, and the small ones nearly covering a car. Martial artists were no strangers to such things. It was this phenomenon known as erosion that had destroyed Prism City. Evidently, the residents within the range of the holes were beyond saving, but this was far from the worst-case scenario. Many fallen evils could be seen in the photos. They gathered around the holes, as though they wanted to throw themselves into the scarlet nothingness. Sacrifice, Fei Yuhan said softly. I guess so. Roland nodded. This was not the first time he had seen such a scene. During the joint annihilation mission, the enemy had used a large number of cores to trigger the erosion and summon pure magic monsters. Now, they had merely skipped the middle step. Now that the city they were in was still peaceful, it was obvious where the problem lay. These are all photos sent back from the surroundings of Sky City. It is currently in an extremely chaotic state, Rock said in a deep voice. Rock said in a low voice, no one knows where they came from, and no one knows what the situation is like in the headquarters. There are cars and people fleeing everywhere. Even the martial artists who sent back these photos are probably dead. He paused. This is a war started by the fallen evils. We have to act immediately and support Sky City. At this point, the defender specially glanced at Roland. Considering that time is tight, the specific arrangements for the mission will be given to everyone when we arrive at the destination. In 30 minutes, the transport plane will arrive at the association's encampment. At that time, everyone must set off immediately without delay. This mission has nothing to do with any faction, and it is also the best opportunity to prove your abilities. After the meeting ended in a hurry, the other party left him alone. Mr. Roland, we are still one step too late. Ever since he had demonstrated how to absorb the core power, the higher-ups of the Prism City had considered handing over the cores stored in the other branches to him as well. In fact, many branches had done so, but Sky City, as the center of the association, had never given them a definite answer. Unexpectedly, the news they received this time was a nightmare. Roland pondered for a moment, then slowly shook his head. Perhaps we were late from the beginning. Rock was stunned for a moment before he understood what Roland was referring to. His expression changed drastically. How is that possible? Not only are there several defenders in Sky City, but the president also spoke to me on the phone not long ago. Apart from that, I can't think of any reason why so many fallen evils would suddenly appear. Only Sky City can provide so many force of nature cores, Roland replied. The sudden appearance of the red light from the top of Sky City, the enemies swarming into the streets, and the sudden opening of the erosion. This is not something that can be done in a short period of time. Now that I think about it, it's not hard to realize that they haven't made any new movements since the fall of Prism City. This itself is illogical. Rock was speechless for a moment. So the president who spoke to you on the phone is either a dead person, Roland said word by word, or the Oracle itself. Chapter 1487. Of course, he could also be an illusion, a puppet, or something else, but the essence was the same. Sky City had probably been invaded by the Oracles a long time ago. That's a mountain fortress with tens of thousands of people. Rock muttered. With the means of the Oracles, it was not difficult for them to destroy anything. After all, they could tear open cracks and cause erosion. But to invade under the eyes of tens of thousands of people without anyone noticing, this kind of ability was somewhat unimaginable. I also hope that I guessed wrong, but this is the most reasonable conclusion. Roland sighed. The dream world had relatively independent rules, so the oracles could not display their full strength. Whatever they wanted to do, they needed the support of magic power. And the places with a relatively large number of fallen evil cores were Prism City and Sky City. Now it seemed that it was no coincidence that the oracles chose to appear in the underground of Prism City. As outsiders, they were not ignorant of this world. Perhaps after the destruction of Prism City, they had already set their eyes on the association's headquarters. As for the oracles left there, other than looking for opportunities to assassinate Zero, the rest were just a cover. There's no point in worrying here, we'll know when we get there. Roland pressed on the defender's shoulder. Do you remember what I said? Now that both worlds are fighting against the gods, and the association has already contributed a lot to the battle of divine will, it's my turn to repay you. Mr. Roland, leave the rest to me. Under Rock's solemn gaze, Roland walked out of the hall. Fei Yuhan and Valkyries were waiting for him outside. The former was not surprising. As a powerful member of the new generation of the association, she would definitely be in the most dangerous place. But the latter was rather strange. He did not think that Valkyries would have any feelings for the dream world, much less fight to protect it. According to the usual practice, she would find an inconspicuous place to slack off. The repeated defeats of the oracles did not mean that they were not a threat. Even in the framework of the dream world, they could easily kill a martial artist. Valkyries was no longer the nightmare lord of the past. Without the power of the magic stone, he was not much different from an ordinary martial artist. Going to Sky City was bound to be dangerous. You don't have to show such a strange expression, Valkyries snapped. I just want to confirm what the god and oracle that you always talk about look like. If it were you, you wouldn't be so indifferent to such an opportunity, right? Roland shrugged. You're right. Just as they were talking, the roar of the helicopter came from the far side of the camp. It was time to go. What followed was a day and a half of traveling. They were transported to the airport by helicopter, and then taken to a private plane to fly to their destination. Finally, they were divided into groups and briefed on their tasks before being sent to the battlefield by the military helicopter. It could be seen that the government's disaster emergency mechanism had been fully activated. The congested traffic only appeared when it was 100 kilometers away from Cloud Sky City. The order of the fleeing crowd was also controlled by the Disaster Relief Army, so it was not completely chaotic. Valkyries, on the other hand, had been staring out the window since the moment they took off. After boarding the private plane, he even requested to move to the window seat, obviously very curious about this first experience. Other than the noise, the speed is not bad. At least, it's faster than me. After a long while, he let out a sigh. Humans do have a unique ability when it comes to studying the laws of the world. You can fly too? Fei Yuhan asked with great interest. Unless they are limited by magic power and size, most people who advance will choose to fuse with a magic stone that has the ability to move quickly, which naturally includes flying. How is it? Do you now know the potential of humans? Roland did not forget to boast. It's a pity, there are no traces of magic power on it. Valkyries shrugged. Why do you say so? Fei Yuhan was puzzled. If the plane needs magic power to operate, then only martial artists like us can fly it. No, what I mean is, if you can create such an intricate machine without the use of magic power, then what if you add the power of magic power? Valkyrie said slowly. I've always thought about the difference between us and the gods. Could this be the reason? After all, magic power is also one of the laws of the world. Roland raised his eyebrows in surprise. Should he say, as expected of the Nightmare Lord? In less than half a year since he came to the dream world, he could already use scientific thinking to understand things. It seemed like the saying that longevity was a hindrance to civilization was not necessarily true. The key was what kind of people lived longer. By noon the next day, Roland could already see Sky City standing on top of the mountain peak. The city below the mountain was filled with thick smoke and explosions could be heard from time to time. It was obvious that martial artists from all over the world were fighting with the fallen evils. Compared to the orderly evacuation of the troops, this was more like a real battlefield. Perhaps even they themselves did not expect that there would be a day when their enemies would rush into the streets in large numbers. And the task assigned to Roland was very clear, that was, to go straight to the center of this incident, the headquarters of the association. The helicopter transported the group of people directly to the gathering point halfway up the mountain, where more than 20 martial artists from other branches were already waiting for his arrival. Probably because they had been warned in advance, they did not greet each other, nor did they question Roland's identity. After a few simple words, they confirmed the basic route and division of labor. Compared to the first joint annihilation operation, this time the elites were obviously practical elites. Not only did they cooperate well, but they also had a high degree of discipline. The structure of Sky City was exactly the opposite of that of Prism City. Because the erosion appeared in mid-air, the association had built a tower to envelop it. However, for the sake of evacuation and rescue, there was a hidden passage under the tower that was connected to the top of the tower. As long as they knew the route, they could avoid the wandering fallen evils on the top of the mountain. Under the guidance of the headquarters guide, the commandos almost did not encounter any obstacles. Occasionally, they encountered a few fallen evils, but they were quickly killed in the process, and Roland did not even need to do anything. Soon, the group arrived at the isolation room on the top floor where the core was stored. It was a huge room that looked like a barrel, and the 4 metallic walls stored the fallen cores that the headquarters had collected so far. And in the middle of the room was a platform that could move up and down, as well as 2 mechanical arms that were used to grab the cores. In terms of grandeur, Sky City was in no way inferior to Prism City. And the figure standing in the middle of the platform was the president of the Martialist Association. But when he turned around, he gradually turned into another person. This transformation did not complete in the blink of an eye, but gradually reorganized his facial features at a speed visible to the naked eye. His height also decreased significantly, and finally, he formed the appearance of an unfamiliar woman. "I'm Oracle Epsilon," she said calmly. "Roland, I've been waiting for you for a long time." Being waited for by the enemy was definitely not a good thing, as it meant that everyone was very likely to be in a trap. But surprisingly, Roland did not hear any movement from the others. If it was Fei Yuhan, she should have already drawn her sword and was ready to strike. He swept a glance to his side, and his heart sank. His surroundings were completely empty, with not a single person in sight. Chapter 1488. Don't worry about your companions, they've just gone somewhere else. The Oracle seemed to have noticed his confusion and took the initiative to explain. Somewhere else? That's right, this is also one of my powers. Creating illusions and inducing illusions can make the consciousness unknowingly walk towards destruction, Epsilon explained. Epsilon explained. Of course, I didn't really do that. I only made them take 1 or 2 wrong paths. Right now, from their point of view, they're probably fighting with you against the powerful fallen evils. Are you trying to tell me that they're actually very safe? She nodded her head. Not only that, I've already arranged a happy ending for your companions. The fallen evils and the Oracle will eventually be defeated, and the phenomenon and erosion will disappear. They'll be exhausted from the battle, but at least they'll be able to smile and lean against the corner of the wall, enjoying the joy of victory. Waving her fists and legs at an empty room until she exhausted all her energy and lay down with a smile, when this scene appeared in Roland's mind, he felt the hair on his back stand up. He wasn't sure about the others, but he knew Fei Yuhan and Valkyries very well. Not only were they strong-willed, they were also very sensitive. He never expected that they wouldn't be able to put up any resistance against Epsilon's powers. No. Not to mention the 2 of them, even he didn't sense it. Something was wrong. According to his past experience, the Oracle's powers should be ineffective against him. Thinking of this, Roland's vigilance was immediately raised to the maximum. And then? There won't be then. The entire world will come to an end, be it the realm of mind or the realm of mind, everything will start anew. But compared to reality, at least they'll disappear in joy and won't feel any pain. This is my benevolence. Without waiting for the Oracle to finish, Roland moved. He leaped up and crossed the nearly 20-meter gap between the platform and the passageway. He pounced at the Oracle and punched out with his fist. He had tested this move many times before when the enemy was talking incessantly to suddenly attack. The surging power in his body responded to his will. With a loud bang, a shockwave swept across the platform. The guardrails, operating instruments, and mechanical arms on the platform cracked. They tumbled and fell to the bottom of the storage room, making a series of muffled sounds. Even Roland was shocked by the power of this attack. He only knew that absorbing those mana cores would strengthen his body, but he didn't expect that his body would reach this level without him knowing. However, there was no sensation in front of his fist. Epsilon seemed to dissipate like a bubble and reappeared behind him. How does it feel to become stronger? The gift I sent you for our first meeting should be quite useful, right? Roland was stunned at first, but he quickly realized the true meaning behind her words. Wait, that astrolabe, did you send it? He had once asked the association to investigate the source of the mail, but in the end, he had found nothing. Both the identity system and the surveillance showed that the sender had only existed for a moment. No matter how they investigated, it was as if the sender had disappeared. Now that he thought of Epsilon's powers, everything made sense. Its name is Gamma, and it's also an oracle. Epsilon said calmly, as though she wasn't discussing her accomplice, but something completely unrelated. Roland was shocked for the first time. After confirming that he didn't hear wrongly, he asked in disbelief. Why? Because I want to know the answer, an answer that only God knows. Her voice sounded a little dazed. Do you understand now? I have no enmity towards you. If you want to head to the celestial domain, you need the help of the dream world. On this goal, we are at least the same. The change was too sudden, and Roland was momentarily at a loss for words. You don't believe me? The world won't lie to you. Epsilon spread out her hands. I didn't summon a rift like Delta to isolate your connection with the world, but you still failed to see through my illusion. That is the evidence. It's because I have no enmity that the dream world doesn't have the ability to repel me. You're actually from land's side. This was the only possibility that Roland could think of. After all, Lon had said that there was more than one oracle who had betrayed him. I don't know how she explained it to you, so I can't answer this question accurately. Epsilon extended 2 fingers. If you're asking if I'm on the same side as her, then the answer is no. Before coming here, I didn't have any memories of Lon. I even killed her with my own hands in the Prism City. Roland couldn't help but twitch his eyebrows. Or perhaps you're asking if she and I have a common goal. She lowered a finger. The answer is similarly no. I'm doing this because of my own thoughts, and it has nothing to do with her. You can think of it as me helping you. Helping me means destroying this world. Roland sneered. You're wrong. The one destroying the world isn't me, but God. Epsilon shook her head. To prevent you from misunderstanding, I'll be straightforward. You should have noticed the changes outside. The barrier that covers the sky can temporarily stop the expansion of the dream world, preventing it from touching the divine domain too early. If not, even if the oracle is still around, God will not hesitate to destroy everything that has been accumulated to date. In fact, you have recently absorbed too many magic power cores, and you are only a hair's breadth away from the boundary. If I'm not wrong, Lon was supposed to monitor the expansion of your dream world, but she died by my hands. That's why no one told you how to reach the origin of magic at the same time. She even knows this. But this barrier also prevents me from contacting the outside world. Don't tell me you can control the real world. I can't. But at least I know that you have already opened up the path to the bottomless land. What happens next is only a matter of time, Epsilon said slowly. You should be able to guess how I obtain information. That's right, the content of your conversation with the Martialist Association and the Grey Castle Design Bureau will be submitted to headquarters in the form of a report, which is in my hands. And the content includes the Glory of the Sun project, as well as the feedback on the usage of various weapons. Roland was enlightened. Epsilon was using these fragments to piece together the entire picture of the outside world. Have you never considered that my unconsciousness might cause an accident? This is also one of the unknown factors, but I don't have a better solution. Only when you enter the realm of mind will the world be activated, so it will definitely trap you within, Epsilon answered patiently. Fortunately, you and I don't have to wait here all the time. After the connection is cut off, the domain can automatically adjust the flow of time. As long as you are willing, it won't be a problem for a day to pass in the blink of an eye. Roland immediately widened his eyes, not daring to close them for a moment. He was afraid that by the time he woke up again, centuries would have passed in the outside world. Don't worry, what you are worried about won't happen. The corners of her mouth curled up, revealing a smile for the first time. The barrier needs magic power to maintain. Even if all the cores stored here are depleted, it will only take a month and a half in the outside world's time. And that is the final deadline. Bookseller's website. Chapter 1489. A month and a half meant that if the plan were to be temporarily halted or cancelled, it was possible that the deadline would be forever missed. Could the people on the floating island really persist to the end without him? And what about the devils? Without Valkyries as a middleman, would the fragile agreement with Sky Lord be broken? Not to mention the Sky Sea realm and the bottomless land that were entrenched in Fog Island. Damn it, it would be great if I could pass this information out. Roland's mind was spinning rapidly, trying to find a way out of this predicament, but he couldn't come up with a feasible plan for a long time. This was different from any crisis he had faced in the past. Even if he destroyed the oracle in front of him, he would not be able to reverse the situation. Roland vaguely realized that this was no longer something that could be resolved by a single person. I don't understand. He fell silent for a while before saying, in the beginning, all of you treated me as a destroyer that had to be destroyed because the dream world threatened the rules set by God. It was even exaggerated to the point of destroying everything that had been accumulated over millions of years. Now, you are acting out of character and are helping me enter the divine domain. Don't tell me that everything that has been accumulated has suddenly become worthless. That's not the only thing that's laughable. Since God can turn the dream world into nothingness at any time, why didn't he do so from the beginning? Don't tell me that he has pity. The more Roland spoke, the angrier he became. His tone was also rising. Countless races are fighting each other in the name of God until they are destroyed. Other than weathered skeletons and ruins, there is nothing else. What kind of accumulation is there to speak of? And you, Epsilon. Since you plan on betraying God, why don't you do it more thoroughly? Lon did it to break free from her shackles, but what about you? If you just want an answer, I don't mind bringing another person to the divine domain. When the time comes, you can ask God as many questions as you want. Speaking inexplicable words and doing unreasonable things, is this the characteristic of those who claim to be gods and God's messengers? They are worse than mortals. At least mortals will know what they want. However, Epsilon was not angered at all. She was not like those oracles in the past, who would become particularly sensitive and excited when it came to the problems of the gods. She even showed a look of understanding after listening to Roland's words. The oracle walked step by step towards Roland. The distance between the two of them was only one body's length. The fact that you can ask these questions proves that you are only one step away from the answer. Be it Epsilon or Roland, this distance wasn't a safe line, but they didn't seem to think much of it. However, if we don't take that step, no matter how close it is, it's still infinitely far away. She looked up at Roland. Gods are great only because of what they do, not how many people know about them. Moreover, the differences between civilizations will lead to completely different views and knowledge, so it's normal that you can't understand. Also, I'm different from Lon. I've never betrayed Lord God. Please remember this. Finally, if you are ready, you can take that step now. With that said, Epsilon slowly reached out her hand to grab Roland's arm and placed it on her chest. What are you doing? Roland retracted his hand reflexively. Isn't it obvious? Obtain the astrolabe, and finally allow the dream world to intersect with the divine domain. You should be very familiar with this process, Epsilon said calmly, as though it had nothing to do with her. Epsilon said calmly, as though the matter had nothing to do with her. The fallen evils and the erosion demon bodies outside were all created by me. Furthermore, their cores have been tightly connected together. Once you finish absorbing the astrolabe, their magic powers will also be absorbed into this world. Such a vast power will be enough to expand the dream world once again, completing the final step. When that happens, the overlapping realm of mind will become a new erosion, but this time, it will be the dream world invading the divine domain, and you will be facing God. Wait. Roland stared at her in surprise. Don't oracles rely on this blob of magic power to survive? Without the astrolabe, you will die. Epsilon laughed. But that is only your concept of death. As a part of God, as long as it isn't destroyed, we will exist forever. The only thing that will disappear is an individual named Epsilon. Even so, you can still hear the answer. No. It's enough to ask. As she said that, she clasped her fingers together and stabbed them into her chest, pulling out a dazzling azure star vortex. The blood that splattered even stained Roland's face. Ahem. Accept it and enter the divine domain. Everything you want to know. Ahem. You will find it there. You. Roland was stunned. He never expected the raid to turn out this way. But at this point, there was no point in hesitating. If what she said wasn't wrong, the moment the barrier rose, the flow of time in the dream world greatly exceeded that of reality. Even if the oracle died and the barrier was removed, it would still be a month and a half later. The only thing he could do was to trust everyone on the floating island. With this in mind, Roland took a deep breath and grabbed the astrolabe. The blue light grew brighter, as though it was burning its last bit of strength. As though it had been stimulated, the heat in his body began to surge crazily. In this dazzling light, he looked at the oracle who had blood seeping out of the corner of her mouth. I want to ask you one last question. Do you think the destruction of the world is inevitable? That's right. Unless you can, defeat His Majesty. Epsilon's voice was already weak. But God cannot be defeated. This is an outcome that was preordained from the beginning. But you still changed your initial decision. All of you have worked hard for so long. You shouldn't disappear without knowing anything. To be able to reach this distance is commendable in itself. Epsilon coughed out a mouthful of blood once again and forced a smile. Since the outcome of destruction is already preordained, why should I do something pointless? This isn't what you truly have in mind. Roland stared into her eyes and enunciated each word. Lon wishes to escape her restraints, while you wish to seek an answer. I don't know what restrains her, nor do I know the question you wish to ask God, but there's one thing I'm certain of. Both of you wish to change, isn't that so? Because both of you have the same gaze, sorry. That's the second question. Epsilon smiled as she closed her eyes. Just as the blue light's intensity reached its peak, she opened her mouth slightly as though she wanted to say something, but before Roland could take a closer look, the blinding light devoured everything. Chapter 1490. On the 6th day of Roland's coma. When Anna walked into the room, Vendi was taking care of him. Let me do it. She picked up a bowl of water, came to the bedside, wet it with a cotton swab, and gently smeared it on Roland's lips. Although the seed of symbiosis had been planted, his body was still affected to a certain extent, such as drying and cracking caused by long-term dehydration. These days, Anna spent far less time with Roland than Vendi, Nightingale, and the others. It was not that she was unwilling, but she had set a rule for herself, that was, contact with him for no more than half an hour a day, otherwise, she was afraid that she would never leave the room. At this time, Vendi would also put down what she was doing and let Anna accompany him. These 30 minutes were usually slow and peaceful, as if time had stopped at this moment. It was not until the report of the guard outside the door came that the silence was broken. Your Highness Anna, the frontline investigation team has returned, the others are waiting for you in the staff room. Anna paused for a moment, then slowly put down the porcelain bowl in her hand. Anna. Vendi said with some worry. Don't worry. She raised her head, I'm fine. At that moment, Vendi felt that Anna's state had changed, the watery eyes that looked at Roland had now become unusually firm, as if the two of them were not the same person. This girl is growing at an amazing speed, Vendi realized, but thinking back to the past in Border Town, she was always the first to learn what Roland taught. This kind of progress may be reasonable. Because of Anna, Border Town became the holy mountain for witches, and now, she was leading everyone to a new peak. Go and do what only you can do, Vendi said softly. I'll leave Roland to you. Anna bowed slightly to her, then walked out of the bedroom. After passing through the long corridor and stairs, she arrived at the door of the staff room, stopped, took several deep breaths, and then reached out to open the door. Your Highness. Everyone in the room stood up and saluted her with their hands on their chests. Anna did not take it for granted. Instead, she returned the same courtesy. She knew that there was a limit to what she was good at. Being able to arrange everything and make everything look orderly for the time being was the result of everyone's efforts. Let the meeting begin. Yes. The Light of Dawn replied respectfully. Lightning, Maggie, and Sylvie worked together to investigate the Misty Island. Based on the coordinates provided by Haxord, Sylvie had confirmed the exact location of the island. Although the magic eye still couldn't penetrate the illusion barrier, it was as eye-catching as the stars in the night sky on the flat sea. In addition, Sylvie also discovered a large number of magic reactions, which almost surrounded the surrounding waters. This was also the reason why the exploration group finally gave up on exploring deeper into the fog. Without a doubt, these magic sources belonged to the Sky-Sea realm. Other than the commonly seen sea ghosts, nest mothers, and blade beasts, there were a few extremely astonishing, big guys. The demons called them mountain-devouring beasts. They were usually evolved from nest mothers and no longer had the ability to create legged beasts or blade beasts. Instead, they covered their bodies in thick armor and used their gigantic mouths to chew on the land, creating a suitable battlefield for the main forces of the Sky-Sea realm. Clearly, the Sky-Sea realm had no intention of handing over the bottomless land. Just as the general staff was formulating a strategy based on the new intelligence, Silent Disaster and Isabella suddenly walked in. The duo's combination could be said to be rather odd. One was a senior lord, while the other was a pure from the original church. Anyone who saw them would be surprised. However, Anna knew that the two of them were in charge of the most important parts. And they had indeed brought good news. Isabella smiled at her. Your Highness, the experiment was a success. Anna could not help but feel relieved. Currently, the biggest problem in dealing with the Sky-Sea realm was the blade beasts that came and went without a trace. Transferring the witches to defend the western region would definitely leave Neverwinter defenseless. Therefore, the safest method was to allow ordinary people to discover the traces of the blade beasts. And the senior Lord Chaos, who had evolved from an eye demon, had the ability to see through all concealment. However, the range of effect was rather small, making it far less versatile than passive vision. If they could expand the range of the Senior Lord Chaos's abilities by several times, they might be able to achieve a decisive effect. The person who first suggested this was none other than Haxord. Anna immediately thought of the Infinity Sigil that Zero had previously used. Finally, the plan was split into 3 parts. Silent Disaster would be in charge of convincing Chaos, Arietta would provide the high-grade magic stones, and Isabella would conduct the relevant research. This was also the reason why the combination was so strange. And Isabella's affirmation meant that the most troublesome part had been broken through. This immediately boosted the morale of the staff. At the very least, they now had a visible direction to attack the bottomless land. After the theoretical conditions were met, all that was left was the deployment part. I hope that Grey Castle can make it in time, Agatha said as she looked at the map of the 4 kingdoms. I believe in Iron Axe and the rest, Anna said slowly. Kingdom of Dawn, Coral Bay. White walked up the deck with his walking stick and slowly moved to the bow of the speedster. It was a fast sailboat with 2 masts. Although it was considered a seagoing ship, it was not good at resisting the wind and waves. Most of the time, it could only sail along the coastline. However, its greatest advantage was its cheap price. In the past, it would cost at least a few hundred golden dragon coins, but now, it only cost 99 golden dragon coins. If it was exchanged for Grey Castle notes, there was a 10% discount. Good day, boss. The sailors who were moving the goods on the deck bowed to him. White nodded in satisfaction. If it were in the past, it would have been a huge expense to hire such a group of people. However, as the merchants became increasingly fond of paddle steamers, the price of ordinary sailboats had dropped. Even these lads who were good at climbing masts and hanging horizontal sails had become much cheaper. After all, steamboats did not need sails, nor did they require so many people. Looking at the sea with blue skies and white clouds, listening to the melodious cries of the seagulls, White was in an exceptionally good mood. From a coachman to a sailboat owner, his fixed assets had multiplied several times. Although he was still in the business of transportation, and his employer was basically Neverwinter, compared to a year or two ago, it was a complete change. Of course, he did not forget his dream of buying a steam-powered truck. However, there were many new things added to this dream, such as buying more ships and cars. Of course, it would be best if he could establish a company that specialized in transportation. "Boss, are you reminiscing about the past again?" someone joked. The sailors knew that when their boss was happy, he loved to brag about his past experiences. As long as no one interrupted him, it was not a problem for him to talk for an hour or two. As listeners, they could also take a break from their busy work, so someone would always start the topic. "What do you mean by reminiscing about the past?" "This is life experience. You guys are too inexperienced." White stared at them. "I pulled a carriage for the Countess, then I worked for the church, and then I was employed by Greycastle to save up my family business. So, those aren't hardships at all, but the foundation of success, understand?" Yes, you're right." Everyone nodded. "Little brats, I know you want to be lazy again." White found a clean place to sit down and patted the floor beside him. "Come over here. Since I'm in a good mood today, there's no harm in telling you." Whistles immediately rang out on the deck. White did not care. He was not a noble. If he had not made the right choice to migrate to Neverwinter with most of the people, his current situation would not be any better than these sailors. Today, I'll tell you about the story of how the King of Greycastle recovered the sedimentation bay in the Kingdom of Wolfheart. White thought for a moment and then began to talk. He talked about the soldiers who stood in the rain and did not fall, and about the noble envoy group who abandoned their armor when they saw their faces. However, most of the content was focused on the fleet that covered the sky. You have no idea how huge that fleet was. The continuous white sails were almost longer than the sea line. Just looking at them from afar, you could not move at all. No wonder the Baron of the Sedimentation Bay immediately submitted to His Majesty. Is it really that exaggerated? Hey, it was even more exaggerated than what I said, kid. I bet that it was the most magnificent scene I've ever seen in my life. You can't understand it even if you break your head. Unless you see it with your own eyes, you'll never be able to reach my level in this lifetime. Of course, such an opportunity may not come again even if you wait for 10 years, White said proudly. Boss, have you seen a ship that can appear out of thin air? Someone asked. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm telling the truth, not some folklore. But it's just opposite the dock, and there's more than one. The man stammered. Did you drink too much last night? White propped himself up and pushed away the sailors around him. He looked toward the sea and was stunned. He saw a huge door appear on the sea. Chapter 1491. My eyelids are struggling. I'm taking a day off today. My dear friends, go to bed early too. Let go of that witch, I just came back from Shanghai. Let me rest for a day. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1492. Not only the sailors on the speeder, but other people on the dock also noticed this incredible fleet. The dock was eerily quiet for a moment. If not for the Greycastle flag flying at the top of the mast and the people on the ship waving at them, they would have immediately abandoned the goods in their hands, turned around, and fled. Even the legendary Spectre's ship would only appear in the misty distant sea. How could it pass by so openly in broad daylight? After more than half an hour, that incredible door finally disappeared, leaving only the silhouette of the fleet on the sea. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, perhaps no one would have believed that it suddenly appeared from the empty sea. All right, get to work. Boss, what exactly is that, His Majesty's secret fleet? It's better for you to know as little as possible. After coaxing the sailors back, White couldn't help but wipe the fine sweat on his forehead. He decided to restrain himself in the future to prevent such an accident from happening again. Although he had similar feelings before, this time he confirmed his view. The King of Grey Castle had tormented this world to the point where it was completely different from the world he was familiar with. With the help of the Sky Lord, Grey Castle completed the mobilization of troops to the northern part of the continent's ridge at an astonishing speed. In just a week, more than 100,000 people had migrated from one end of the continent to the other. Among them, there were about 20,000 regular soldiers, and the ordnance, supplies, and rations were enough to last for a month. This was definitely not an easy task. In order to maximize the efficiency of the distortion door, Iron Axe personally went to Neverwinter to organize the preliminary preparations. The Rock became a specialized transport, and together with Agatha, they transported the Red Mist to the undestroyed Blackstone storage towers built in the Kingdom of Wolfheart in the Kingdom of Everwinter. At the same time, in order to replenish Haxord's magic power, Spear, Leaf, and the others practically followed him all the way, not even giving him time to catch his breath. The continuous use of the distortion doors, coupled with the administrative office's strong execution ability, allowed for the rapid completion of the transcontinental transfer. Although many soldiers of the First Army were astonished by the Sky Lord and the demons in the ridge of the continent, Iron Axe's leadership prevented these doubts from becoming a problem. Gradually, there was a rumor that the demons had surrendered to the King of Grey Castle and pledged allegiance to him. Of course, Haxord, who had been notified in advance, could only turn a blind eye to this and pretend that he had never heard of such rumors, keeping all the curses in his heart. On the 19th day of Roland's coma, the front lines were ready to attack Fog Island. In the General Staff Department, all the higher-ups were conducting their final tactical deduction. First, Lightning will fire a signal flare above the destination to point out the direction for Madame Eleanor. After that, the floating island will open the way and enter the target area from the west. Edith pushed the model representing the floating island to the west side of the map. This step will take about 3 days. With the floating island size, it will definitely be discovered by the Sky Sea realm. But even so, they don't have any good methods to stop us, Haxord said confidently. From the very beginning, the deity of gods was designed to target the Sky Sea realm's lair. Although the island is small, it is in essence the deity of gods. As long as we do not float over the sea, the enemy can only watch from the water. The acid that the nest mothers shoot out will at most leave some black spots on the mountain rocks. For now, the enemy won't pose much of a threat to us. The Air Knight's main mission is to suppress the enemy and use the bottomless land as the center to clear out an isolation zone. Philinshilt placed a ruler horizontally in the middle of the island. Your Highness Tilly, I'll have to trouble you with this. Tilly nodded. Once the enemy's attention is attracted by the floating island, the First Army will enter the scene from the north and gradually push south. The army's goal is to completely eliminate the remaining enemies and occupy the surrounding areas of the bottomless land, buying time for Her Highness Anna to find the entrance to the Divine Realm. The Pearl of the Northern Region paused. According to Joan, there is a guide on the island who calls herself the Guardian. She might be able to open a passage into the realm of mind. I remember telling you the last time that I killed the Guardian, Haxord reminded. Indeed, but after comparing the information, we believe that she won't die so easily. Edith shrugged. What you saw was a person of the same race who advanced, but what Joan saw was a human female. Either the Guardian is an illusion, or there are several of them. Considering that there are no signs of human habitation on the island, the fact that she can stay there for thousands of years means that she's extraordinary. But, will this person really lead us into the Divine Realm? Vendi asked worriedly. The scene fell into silence. In fact, the second half of the plan was not supported by any reliable information. It was unknown if such an entrance existed or not. Nightingale had once told everyone about the backtrack scenes that Roland had seen in the dream world, and that was the only clue they had. However, the content was too obscure and difficult to understand. Even Anna could not find any useful clues. The only thing that could be confirmed at present was that the Guardian would only open the path to heaven for the victorious race that carried the complete legacy. As for whether Roland was within the range of her guide, it was still unknown. If we don't give it a try, we will never have an answer to this question, Anna said decisively. This unwavering answer made everyone relax, as though they were suddenly filled with confidence. I have to remind you, humans, Silent Disaster suddenly said. This battle is completely different from the wars you are familiar with. It will not be carried out one step at a time. Once we come into contact with the Sky-Sea realm, the subsequent steps will be carried out simultaneously. Regardless of what you want to do, you have to make haste. In other words, it's impossible for us to set up camp and slowly search the island? Edith pricked up her brows. Believe what she says. Haxord shrugged. Sarakas has spent most of her time fighting the Sky-Sea realm for the past 100 years. She should be the person who understands the enemy the most. Those monsters, are there really that many? Philin could not help but ask. More than you can imagine. There was a rare seriousness in Sky Lord's tone. When they swarm over, the sea will turn into a thick black color. Now that the Blackstone region has fallen into the hands of the Sky-Sea realm, there are no longer any obstacles between them and the bottomless land. It is impossible to defend the island with just a few people. Without any reinforcements, it's just a matter of how long they can last. We have never thought of staying there for long. Finally, Anna interrupted the argument. The floating island will attract the firepower and provide reinforcements. The First Army will use the distortion door to quickly occupy the bottomless land, and at the same time, search for traces of the Guardian. As for what to do next, it will depend on the enemy's reaction. Did I understand wrongly? That's right, Your Highness. The Pearl of the Northern Region stroked her chest. Then let's begin the operation in 2 days. Anna made the final decision. Regardless, we have to send Roland into the bottomless land. This is also the only way to end the battle of divine will. Yes, Your Highness, everyone answered in unison. Bookseller's Home. Chapter 1493. On the 5th day of the battle, it was 9:20 in the morning. A thick fog suddenly floated around the floating island. The originally clear sky suddenly turned dark and gloomy, and visibility dropped to a few dozen meters. It's here. Everyone in the command center realized that they were crossing the illusory boundary that Haxord had mentioned. Although it was already the 3rd day of the operation, the real battle had only begun at this moment. The large room was silent. Everyone's eyes were glued to the light screen, their bodies stretched taut. Even Sylvie's magic eye was unable to penetrate this barrier. This meant that the land ahead was completely unknown. Regardless of the outcome of fate, they would only know at the very last moment. To the First Army's upper echelons, who were used to being well-informed and prepared for everything, this feeling of unease had not appeared in a long time. Suddenly, a faint caw of a crow entered everyone's ears. Philin and company looked at each other. This was the sea, how could there be crows? But it was not an auditory hallucination. Soon, more caws joined in. They overlapped with each other, making it difficult to tell if it was an echo or if they had encountered a huge flock of crows. In less than a few minutes, the caws had joined together and were indistinguishable. At the same time, they became louder and louder. A staff officer's expression suddenly changed. This is the caw of a sea ghost. Sea ghost? Someone asked. Are they the legendary creatures? No. They are not legends. I once worked at Festive Harbor. When the old sailors there speak of sea ghosts, they would describe them as black crows of the sea. making a mountain out of a molehill. Haxord crossed his arms and said, "They are just the lowest vassals of the Sky Sea realm. Their only advantage is that they have sufficient numbers. They are the most suitable to fill up the battlefield. In a while, you will see what kind of enemy our race has been fighting." As Sky Lord spoke, the density of the fog suddenly decreased. The floating island's landing strip appeared before their eyes at a speed visible to the naked eye, followed by the distant sky and sea. The dome was still gloomy, but at least it looked normal. However, the scenery on the sea was completely different. Everyone who saw the scene on the other side of the light screen shuddered in unison. It was definitely a scene that no one could forget even if they wanted to. Countless water ghosts poked their heads out of the sea and opened their mouths to roar at the floating island. It was as if a dense expanse of small holes had opened up in the sea. Just a glance at it would make one's scalp go numb. Their bodies floating underwater caused the seawater to appear a strange black color. If one had to describe it, it was a bit like a puddle where a nest of tadpoles had hatched. However, it was not uncommon to fill puddles, but it was extremely rare to dye the sea with ink. And the rumored bottomless land had also appeared in front of the floating island. Its size was similar to Sleeping Island, but there were no signs of a freshwater lake on it. Instead, it appeared lush and lush, completely unlike a lone island in the middle of the ocean. Very soon, the nest mothers appeared among the sea ghosts. They opened the ribs on their backs and sprayed green slime into the sky. For a moment, it was as if a rain of venom had fallen below the floating island. If the humans had taken the lead instead of the North Slope mine, the outcome would have been obvious. A total of 1524. Eleanor's voice suddenly sounded in everyone's mind. "You mean?" Iron Axe asked in surprise. "The number of acid nest mothers." She used her usual languid tone to reply. "It's not much more than the number of cannonballs." Just as she finished her sentence, a boom sounded from the bottom of the floating island. The first to counterattack was Eleanor. A 152mm long-song cannon was fired, and after flying nearly 1,000 meters, it accurately smashed into the body of a nest mother. The shell drilled into its organs and exploded, blasting it into two. At the same time, the sea ghosts beside it were also affected by the explosion. The flying shrapnel stirred up dense splashes on the surface of the sea, but this time, it was no longer black, but the color of blue blood. In the past half a month, the engineering team's greatest modification to the floating island was the addition of a series of cannon mounts, ranging from 20mm autocannons to the largest caliber long-song cannons. After all, the Sky Sea realm's main advantage was at sea. Without the pressure of air defense, increasing their firepower was naturally the best choice for the First Army. At this moment, the floating island was like an aerial battleship, one that was equipped with a fire control computer. Under Eleanor's control, more automatic cannons joined in the firing, turning the bottom of the island into a land of death where steel and flesh interweaved. The sounds of cannons and machine guns alternated, suppressing the cries of the sea ghosts. Although Haxord maintained his posture, the expression on his face had unknowingly turned complicated. Clearly, he had realized that when the heritage of the various races were combined, it would produce an astonishing effect. "Get the Air Knight to prepare to set off as well," Tilly said into the microphone. According to the plan, the Air Knight would no longer be in charge of the final battle. They would be split into dozens of batches and hover above the bottomless land for extended periods of time. Cutting off reinforcements, striking the enemy's main force, and relieving the pressure on the ground forces were all missions that the Air Knight had to shoulder. The weakness of the Sky Sea realm's aerial forces had to be exploited to the fullest. Moments later, fully loaded biplanes glided out of the hangar and entered the waiting area. At 10:40 in the morning, the Eleanor entered the island's boundary. The number of monsters that were attracted by the massive object were uncountable. They stepped on the corpses of their own kind and swarmed towards the floating island, completely disregarding the fact that they were unable to deal any damage to the floating island. Of course, this was also because Eleanor had deliberately lowered her altitude to lure the enemies into attempting to climb onto the island. However, under the heavy machine gun fire, breaking through the net of fire was definitely not an easy task. Compared to the boiling west, the other areas were much quieter. Clearly, the sudden arrival of the floating fortress had attracted most of the enemy's attention. "Let's begin." Anna turned to Haxord and said. The latter snapped his fingers and disappeared from the command post. At the same time, Chaos, who had been persuaded by Silent Disaster to occupy the roof of the bridge, also released its ability. After being strengthened by the Infinite Sigil, the magic ripple that contained the power of true vision instantly swept across the sky above the island. Through the screen, the upper echelons of the command post could clearly see the figures of blade beasts suddenly appearing in the originally empty space. Their contours gradually took form, as though they were being forcefully pulled out of their hiding places. The next moment, Sky Lord appeared at the edge of the bottomless land. He looked up at the sky above the sinkhole. Even without taking out the 5-colored magic stone, he could still recall the magnificent scene he saw when he first arrived. Is this a fate set by the gods? Perhaps, from the moment he witnessed the magic power's brilliance condensing here and the battle of divine wills ending, it was only a matter of time before this day arrived. But when the time came, he felt that the feeling of joining forces with humans wasn't that bad. Chapter 1494. Reporting to HQ, 6th Battalion is moving towards 11. 3rd Battalion has occupied one position. Detected a powerful magic power source approaching. Need to inform Air Knight to calibrate and intercept the signal. This is lightning. Understood. Tank teams 19 and 20 are in contact with the enemy. Target is the blade beasts. With the entry of the ground troops, the command post immediately became bustling with activity. Correspondents were in charge of categorizing the information they received into the hands of the strategists, who would then provide feedback on the sand table map for the decision-makers to make. At this moment, there were dozens of red flags and squares on the sand table. They represented the infantry, artillery, and armored divisions of the First Army. From the overall situation, the initial stages of the plan were progressing smoothly. The red markings were spreading outwards with the bottomless land as the center. The Skysea realm had clearly sensed the sudden appearance of the troops as a portion of the monsters began to shift their targets and pounce at the First Army. However, in the face of the rapidly forming formation, sporadic attacks were no different from suicide. Through the distortion door, the troops on the other side of the sea were surging into the lone island. According to the predetermined plan, the operation would soon enter the search phase. This was also the most uncertain part of the entire plan. No one knew where the Guardian was, how they would appear, or if they would open the path to the realm of mind. "I'll leave the next command to you," Anna said to Iron Axe, Edith, and the rest. "Do you have to go alone?" Vendi's expression was filled with reluctance and worry. This was agreed upon from the beginning. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. "I'm not good at leading troops into battle, so I can't help anyone here. Besides, the Guardian might vary from person to person. If I were to stay in the air, I might miss the only chance to meet them. Let her go. I'll watch over her." Nightingale had already changed into a neat combat suit. Not only did she have the pistol Roland had given her by her waist, she also had a semi-automatic rifle and a long sword on her back. Vendi could only hug Anna. "You must return safely, Your Highness." "Yes, I will," the latter replied seriously before looking at Phyllis. "Are the gods' punishment witches ready?" Phyllis nodded. "Everyone, be on standby." "Very well, let's go." Anna resolutely walked out of the command center. "This is Malt's gift to you." "Thank you." Danny took the bullet, loaded it into the chamber, and shot it into the head of a sea ghost that was approaching. As a wandering unit on the battlefield, the precision archer could choose his own battle location most of the time. As always, he chose the most dangerous outer region, following closely behind those steel chariots. There would be no machine guns or artillery in this area, so the pressure from the enemy would be the greatest. He had long noticed that although the tanks of the First Army were powerful, they lacked cover from the sides and rear. Especially around the sinkhole, there were stone tablets of various shapes everywhere, which made it impossible for the people in the vehicles to see the approaching enemies. And this kind of venue was simply designed for him. Be careful, there's a big guy 150 meters to the right. Understood. Danny peeked out from behind a stone tablet and saw a medium-sized blade beast sneaking around the back of a tank in an attempt to launch a sneak attack. Although these monsters were not made of steel, their lethality and agility were not to be underestimated. Especially their scythe-like front claws, when filled with magic power, they could penetrate the armor of a tank. He slowly pushed a new bullet into the chamber and raised the rifle in slow motion, but Danny did not aim at the target, but moved it into the air. According to the combat manual, the blade beasts had thick armor on their heads, and it was difficult for normal bullets to kill them in one shot. Furthermore, before the enemy launched an attack, they would be extremely wary of the possible threats around them, and it was not recommended for soldiers to face them alone. Thus, he had to wait for a more suitable opportunity to strike. And that was the moment the enemy launched a sneak attack. The blade beast did not notice Danny, who was like a statue. It crawled to the ambush range, spread its thin wings, and suddenly leaped towards the tank. At the same time, Danny pulled the trigger. Following a gunshot, the bullet accurately penetrated the exposed frontal bone of the blade beast and entered its skull. The blade beast instantly froze and glided a few meters due to inertia before falling heavily to the ground, but at this moment, other than twitching, it was no longer a threat. "You're still so powerful." "That's because you're watching me." Danny smiled and patted Malt's head. Just as he was about to look for his next target, he suddenly realized that more than 10 sea ghosts had gathered around him. While he was concentrating on the blade beasts, Tisk, Danny pulled his partner behind him, then leaned against the stone tablet and raised his spear. Now that it was impossible to escape, he only wanted to know how many sea ghosts he could kill before he was killed. But at this moment, an unbelievable scene appeared. The sea ghosts did not swarm up to tear him into pieces, but instead started biting each other. The grass was instantly filled with the pungent smell of blood. Until the last sea ghost fell, there was not a single complete corpse around. Then, a group of men and horses walked out from behind. Although they were also wearing the uniform of the First Army, their appearances were obviously different. They were Majin's troops from the southernmost region. Precision shooter. The leader sized up his weapon and emblem. "Why are you here alone? Where's your protector?" Fairy, another person tugged on the former's sleeve and said embarrassedly, "If you don't mind, you can temporarily come with us." "I didn't act alone, but I still have to thank you." Danny had already realized that this warrior who was called Fairy was definitely not an ordinary person. "As for what happens next, I still hope that I can," kaboom. The tanks in front suddenly fired a series of concentrated cannons. Everyone turned their heads and saw more than 10 ugly nest mothers slowly appearing on the horizon. They were surrounded by a group of blade beasts, crawling forward while withstanding the bombardment of the field cannons. At the same time, the ribs on their backs opened up, revealing the intestine-like organs below. "It's the venom nest mother." Fairy frowned and waved his arm. "Quick, find cover. Bring the anti-demon grenades over." That was no longer a target that firearms could deal with. The tanks also began to reverse to disperse the formation. At this moment, the Sky Knight's whistling came from above. Several biplanes swooped down and dropped bombs on the nest mothers. The ground was instantly filled with pillars of fire. Amidst the violent explosions and rolling smoke, those flames were like bone-corroding things that stuck tightly to the enemy's body. The latter let out a shrill scream and wanted to escape from the sea of fire. However, on land, their movements were not much faster than worms. In a short while, the nest mother was completely silent. Cheers and whistles rang out from the troops. Danny even saw the pilot in the low-flying cockpit proudly giving them a thumbs up. Then, after the dive, the Heaven's Wrath turned around and launched a pincer attack with the armored troops. Chapter 1495. There's another large group of enemies coming from the east, Ku. Your Highness Anna, how's the situation on your side, Ku? Maggie's voice sounded from the sigil of listening once again. Even though she did not use any hurried words, Anna could still sense the urgency of the situation. With the passage of time, the number of Sky Sea Realm warriors that had entered the battlefield was constantly increasing. They swam over from all directions and climbed up Fog Island, charging wave after wave at the first army, completely ignoring the corpses of their own kind beneath their feet. The lush grassland no longer existed, and in its place was scorched earth that emitted pungent smoke. And at the lower ground, the flowing bluish-black blood had already converged into small puddles. The battle had already turned from an easy victory to a stalemate. Against such a ferocious siege that disregarded all costs, the First Army inevitably suffered casualties. Even with Eleanor and Ariel Knight's support, there was no guarantee that not a single monster would be missed. The blade beasts that had lost their invisibility were still enemies that ordinary soldiers found difficult to deal with, not to mention the mutated nest mothers that could spray acid and corrode steel from a distance, as well as the mountain-like mountain-devouring beasts. Now, the army was still able to maintain the front lines and keep the Sky Sea Realm out of the sinkhole, but the risks were piling up at a visible rate. No one knew how many more of their forces were hidden in the sea, and the moment a breach appeared, it could very well lead to a collapse. Maggie was reminding her that they had to make good use of their time. However, Anna and company had yet to see the Guardian's figure. There's no result from the inner circle. She gently exhaled, trying to make her voice as calm as possible. We are currently searching further out. Understood, all the best, Ku. I think it's time to retreat. Haxord suddenly said. Young lady, the performance of you and your tribe has indeed surprised me. To be able to persist so far into enemy territory and fight alone, it can be considered a successful battle. But perseverance does not necessarily bring rewards. The fact that the Guardian has yet to appear only means that it is no longer here. It's also possible that it doesn't want to be affected by the cannon fire, so it has found a place to hide. Nightingale retorted. If we were to give up now, everything will be set in stone. Let me make this clear first. Although I've agreed to work with you, I don't intend to die here. If the situation is irreversible, I will leave first. When that happens, these soldiers will have nowhere to retreat to. Are you sure you want to do this? Looking at Anna's gaze, it couldn't help but add, of course. I will only do this as a last resort. I won't force you to stay, and I don't have the strength to force you. Anna said frankly, but there's something I hope you understand. The failure of the plan means that there's no future. It might take a long time for the Sky Sea Realm to devour the entire world, and most of the humans here will never see that day. But for people like you who have long lives, this is a fate that you have to face. Do you want to live in such a world? Haxord was momentarily speechless. We haven't reached our limits yet, Silent Disaster suddenly said. What? I've fought with humans before, and this is far from their limit. If it's that unit, they should be able to last longer. She reached out to pull out the obsidian sword from her back. Besides, I haven't done anything yet. Take note, Your Highness Anna. There's a Sky Sea Realm unit approaching in front of you. Almost at the same time, Sylvie's warning sounded from the sigil. I've already informed the two closest armored teams, but they are currently engaged in battle with the enemy. Reinforcements might arrive later. Let them take care of themselves. Nightingale took a step forward. Leave this to us. That's right. I don't want to lose to the devil on such matters. The gods' punishment witches raised the shotguns in their hands. Soon, a mixed unit of blade beasts and nest mothers appeared in front of them. Behind them were two gigantic mountain-devouring beasts. Silent Disaster was the first to charge into the enemy's formation. Under her summons, dark clouds gathered in the sky as golden streams of light constantly flickered and converged. Finally, they transformed into a bolt of lightning that tore through the heavens and rained down on her surroundings. This one attack turned dozens of monsters into ashes. Nightingale followed closely behind. She used the changing lines to leap nearly 100 meters in a single step and appeared directly behind the front row of blade beasts. By the time the opponents reacted and pounced back, they were greeted by a few bullets that had already been fired. She did not even bother to look at the outcome as she turned around and continued walking. She did not know if it was an illusion, but the fog world seemed to have become a lot friendlier. It would always provide her with suitable lines when she needed it. In a few blinks of an eye, she arrived in front of the nest mother. This was also the goal that Nightingale had set from the beginning. Unlike the blade beasts, nest mothers could constantly hatch blades and limbs, and were the core strength of the Sky-Sea realm. Every kill would weaken the enemy's strength. Furthermore, this was not the first nest mother she had encountered. Most people would be at a loss when facing such a gigantic creature, but she would not. Nightingale skillfully passed through the ribs and flesh, followed by the intestines, heart and lungs, and finally arrived at the enemy's core, the eyes. Although it was slightly different from the nest mother that had devoured the thousand-eye demon, they were still of the same origin in terms of structure. To these monsters, the gigantic eyeball hidden in their bodies was equivalent to their brain. She stuffed the gun barrel straight into the nest mother's eyeball and pulled the trigger. The latter did not even have the time to use its tentacles to chase her away before its brain was blasted open. Having lost its ability to control the nest mother, it could no longer use its magic power, and its gigantic body that relied on magic power to prop itself up collapsed. Anna stood in her original spot and could not help but clench her fists. She was not as calm as everyone imagined. 5 years ago, she was just an ordinary girl from a small border town, so how could she be calm and unperturbed in the face of everything? She had thought of retreating countless times, but upon thinking that Roland might never wake up, she suppressed her fear and clenched her teeth to persevere. But now, Anna realized that the fear in her heart had greatly reduced. Everyone's fighting figures gradually blurred her vision. She was not the only one persevering, there were many people standing by her side, cutting through the thorns with her as they advanced towards the same goal. She once again understood the meaning of a battle of destiny. A predetermined path was a kind of destiny. And rising up to resist and break free from the shackles was another kind of destiny. The difference was that the latter's destiny was written by herself. At this moment, an extremely bright light burst out from the surface of the sea tens of kilometers to the north. It rapidly expanded, illuminating the gray sea horizon into a sparkling eerie blue. It was the Kuan-Pen carrying out an interception mission. The glory of the sun, which had been produced in a month and a half, was planned to be used to separate the Sky-Sea realm's reinforcements. Its explosion meant that a large number of enemies were surging over from the distant sea, and the situation had undoubtedly reached a critical juncture. Anna no longer had the uneasiness she had in the beginning. She faced the impending explosion without taking a step back. Suddenly, a woman's figure appeared out of thin air in front of Anna. She was dressed in white, and her long hair was blown up by the airwaves, blocking the brilliance of the explosion behind her. Chapter 1496. The moment she opened her mouth, the entire world seemed to have quietened down. Anna could hear her own heartbeat. She opened her mouth, but her voice did not sound like it came from her throat. "Then where else can we go?" The guardian unexpectedly fell silent. "It seems that you also know the answer. Apart from here, we have nowhere else to go." Anna focused her attention and carefully looked at the guardian. She looked exactly like a human and spoke the standard language of the kingdom. Coupled with the way she suddenly appeared, it was easy to guess her origins. "I heard from Joan that you were trapped here. Have you never thought of leaving?" "Miss Joan." The guardian revealed a gentle smile. "It seems that she really brought this problem back. But unfortunately, there is no true solution to it. But someone is trying to find the answer. Furthermore, she is of the same kind as you." "Same kind?" "I know you belong to the realm of mind, and there, an oracle named Lon tried to change everything." Anna quickly explained the purpose of her visit. "There are 2 conditions to achieve the goal. One of them has been achieved, and I have brought the person who can solve the second problem. Next, we just need to open the light bridge and send him into the realm of mind. I'm sorry, I don't know the so-called oracle." The guardian shook her head and interrupted her. "Also, To open the bridge, a complete inheritance must be inserted into the bottomless pedestal. Only then can the origin of magic be activated and the light bridge appear. You do know a lot, but I can't help you. Wait. Anna's expression finally changed. She said anxiously, aren't you the guide? I am indeed. But without the inheritance, there is nothing I can do. The guardian walked to Anna's side and gently stroked her hair. Leave here quickly, child, before it's too late. The guardian's figure began to fade, as if she was about to disappear into thin air. Anna reached out to grab her, but she could not touch anything. Finally, forget everything you have ever heard, if there is such a thing as a traitorous oracle. When she completely dissipated, Anna heard her murmur, the battle of divine will is an attempt to find the answer. After such a long and vast process of seeking answers, we still haven't reached a conclusion. How can it be solved by one or two people? If he really had such an ability, he naturally wouldn't need a bridge and key. This is the result of persevering to the end. Anna lowered her head to look at her empty palm and couldn't help but freeze in place. What should she do next? Nightingale felt her movements become smoother and smoother. It was as if something had changed from what it had been. She could not tell what exactly had changed, but she could sense the harmony in the mist. Although the contours of the past were convenient for her, they were also extremely dangerous blades. She had to maintain a high level of concentration to ensure that she would not be hurt by her own ability. But at this moment, this black and white world was as docile as a sheep, allowing her to do whatever she wanted. She felt a sense of contentment as she advanced. In just a short period of time, she had killed 3 nest mothers, and the enemy had not even touched the corner of her clothes. In a single round, even Silent Disaster, who was equivalent to a transcendent, did not perform better than her. This made Nightingale feel rather pleased. The only thing that made her uncomfortable was the mucus that hung on her body. She could avoid the enemy's claws and tentacles, but she was unable to isolate the smelly organs. This was the price she had to pay for going deep into the nest mother's body to find its weakness. If it was Anna, she should be able to easily burn these disgusting sticky things, right? At this thought, she couldn't help but glance at Anna. But it was this glance that made her hair stand on end. She saw Anna facing north in a daze, motionless, as though she had been fixed in place by something. A few blade beasts were moving from the direction of the sinkhole to where she was standing. Phyllis had already exchanged blows with one of them and anxiously called out to Anna, but the latter did not seem to hear her at all. What was she doing? From that angle, she should have been able to clearly see Phyllis and the approaching enemy. Nightingale suddenly turned around, ignoring the pursuing Skysea Realm monsters, and ran towards Anna as fast as she could. However, the blade beasts had already spread open the thin wings on their backs. Damn it, it's too late. At that instant, she saw a white line traversing the ground, extending from her feet to the front of Anna. It was likely a crack in the soil. Although it was a contour that existed in nature, it was too complicated and tiny, so it could not be displayed by her ability. If the contour of every piece of soil and every piece of gravel could change at any time, it meant that she had no place to land her feet. It was useless no matter how focused she was. As for choosing to link small cracks together and label them as a pure white line, this was the first time Nightingale had seen something like this. It was like a clear guide that made her subconsciously reach out to grab at the air before pulling upwards. The magic power in her body immediately surged out as the foggy world responded to her will. The lines suddenly rose up, splitting the scenery in front of her into 2. On one side was the spot where Anna was standing. There was almost no change, while on the other side, the ground had risen up, forming a difference of nearly a meter. But it wasn't just a simple change in terrain. In an instant, the blade beasts that were pouncing towards her were also split apart. The front half was still gliding in the air, but the back half had suddenly risen up, as though the two were not on the same plane. The enemies that were evenly split apart fell to the ground one after another, landing not far from Anna. The cuts on their bodies were as smooth as a mirror. At the same time, Nightingale also felt an extreme sense of exhaustion welling up in her heart, making it difficult for her to even stand firmly. That was a symptom of overconsumption of magic power. It was obvious that the series of changes just now was not caused by an ordinary display of her ability. But she did not have the time to think about it. Anna was still standing at the same spot, as though everything around her had nothing to do with her. Nightingale supported her weak body, gritted her teeth, and walked to her back. She grabbed her shoulder and straightened her. "What are you doing? Everyone is fighting to achieve your goal, but you put yourself in danger so easily. Do you want everyone's efforts to go to waste?" Nightingale wanted to yell at her, but the words stopped at the tip of her tongue. She understood Anna, even more than Roland. Until the final moment, Anna would absolutely not give up. There was probably only one reason for her to be in such a daze. She had already found the guardian, and the result she received was a rejection. The words of reprimand instantly vanished. To be able to stand after enduring such immense pressure without receiving any rewards already required immense courage. "Have you met the guardian?" Nightingale asked softly. "Yes." Anna slowly nodded. It was indeed the case. Looking at the dazed look on her face, she suddenly felt an immense sadness. Despite everyone's efforts, they were ultimately unable to reverse their predestined fate. She could not help but gently pull her into an embrace. "It's fine. It doesn't matter even if we fail. We will accompany you to the end." "Fail? Why do you say that?" Anna's reaction exceeded her expectations. Nightingale was momentarily stumped. "Did the guardian agree to your request?" "No, she rejected it. Without the heritage item, the bottomless land will not open. Even she is helpless." Anna shook her head. "Then why did you?" Chapter 1497. So she was in a daze because she had been thinking about this problem. Nightingale touched her pounding chest and snapped at Anna's forehead. "Please find a safe place to study it next time, all right? So what's your conclusion? Please explain it in the shortest possible sentence." At this moment, Phyllis and the rest rushed over. Seeing that the two were safe, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Anna felt a little guilty as she held her forehead and whispered, "Jump down." Nightingale was taken aback. After confirming that she did not hear wrongly, she sighed. "No, it's better if you explain it in detail from the beginning to the end." She turned to look in the direction of the bottomless land. "Actually, it's not difficult to understand. Since the Oracle and the Guardian came from the realm of mind, it's impossible for Lon not to know the rules that require an inheritance to activate it. Regardless of how much of what she said was the truth and how much was a lie, it's impossible for her to forget the most basic problem after meticulously planning for so long." "That makes sense." Nightingale thought for a moment. "So you believe that Roland can activate that pillar of light by himself?" "No, I'm afraid the pillar of light isn't where we need to go." Anna shook her head. "Only the victors of the Battle of Divine will can cross the bridge and reach the other side. And we did not win, nor did we obtain the other inheritance shards." Similarly, Lon did not mention this matter from the beginning to the end. Besides, seizing the shards of other races and stopping the Battle of Divine will contradict each other. If it's a key step in the plan, then it's a little too illogical. "Then, where should we go?" Nightingale realized that she could not keep up with Anna's train of thought. "Only things that you personally comprehend are the true answers." Anna repeated Lan's words. If she had a premonition that God would stop her from divulging the key information, then the fragments transmitted by the astrolabe are worth considering. Now that you think about it, which part left the deepest impression on you? Something like gravity. That's right. In the second scene that Roland saw, the core of this world should be located at the center of the planet, so we should be facing down, not up. The bottomless land may seem unreachable, but don't forget, Anna paused when she said that. Gravity is no longer the most revered force in this world. Wait. It took Phyllis a while to understand what he meant by jump. Are you sure? This was too risky. If one could jump down and be safe, someone should have reached the bottom a long time ago. You've seen the murals left by the Radiation Clan. They even built cranes and ladders next to the sinkhole. But judging from the replays of the clips, they soon gave up the attempt, which means that it's not going to work at all. Being able to go down and being able to come up are two different things. Anna shook her head. I'm afraid this is the true meaning of the Guardian's so-called capable person. Going down doesn't require any key, but if you can't activate the light bridge, you may never be able to return to the surface. There's no limit to going downwards, but one has to rely on the bridge to go up, that's right. As for how to enter the bottomless land, I've previously thought of many possibilities, she continued. And the truth is, it wasn't until I talked to Catcher that I was sure of it. Or perhaps, this is the only way to explain why Lon didn't mention the Guardian at all. Because what Roland wants to do has nothing to do with them from the very beginning. So you plan on throwing Roland into the sinkhole? Sky Lord revealed a look of surprise. No, I'll be accompanying him. Anna said decisively. I'll leave the retreating mission to all of you. There's no need to stay here any longer. Quickly return to the floating island. The scene fell into silence. Although no one was willing to abandon Anna, everyone knew the Queen's character. Once she made a serious decision, even His Majesty would find it difficult to change her mind. Seeing no one speak, Haxord already knew what was going on. It nodded and opened a teleportation door above the sinkhole. Young lady, your performance is enough to prove the extraordinariness of your race. Even if you fail, it's an honorable defeat. Anna controlled Blackfire to carry the unconscious Roland and resolutely stepped through the door. And the next moment, Nightingale vanished from her spot. By the time the others reacted, it was too late to stop her. The last person to walk towards the distortion door was Silent Disaster. Wait, are you going as well? Haxord said with a frown. I said that when she heads to the bottomless land, I'll accompany her. Sarakas crossed the door without turning her head. Regardless of where it is. When the light returned to silence and darkness took over everything, Roland heard a familiar voice. Where people came from and where they went had always been a profound and interesting question. He turned his head and saw the blurry shadow once again. Its interior shimmered with a faint light, and it was also the only beacon in this space. It had been discussed for 10,000 years, and every era had a completely different answer. But regardless of the answer, it was filled with wisdom. It led us to constantly move forward and explore the unknown. But 10,000 years later, this question suddenly changed and became meaningless. In the following tens of thousands of years, no one cared about where we came from or where we were going. Because the answer had already been proven. Vanishing was our eternal destination. It let out a sigh of its entire life. This world was not specially prepared for life. From its appearance to 6 quadrillion years ago, stars would enter a period of decline. After burning up, they would either become dwarfs or black holes. The universe would then turn pitch black. Under the pull of gravity, dwarfs might be able to light up again during collisions, becoming new stars once again. However, that would be their final glow, like a rare oasis in a desert. Powerful civilizations would occupy the oasis of light, while other civilizations would rely on the aging dwarfs to survive, until the last bit of energy was drained. This was the scene in 2 quadrillion years. Gravity would become the only ruler of the world. Dead galaxies would be constantly sucked into black holes, and the massive amounts of radiation would cause them to emit a blinding glow, even more resplendent than stars. It would also be the only possible source of energy. The gray shadow's voice gradually became softer. Another 10 quadrillion years later, dwarfs would also evaporate, and there would no longer be any physical planets or matter in the universe. The result of energy evenly spreading to every corner would be that every place would be lifeless. Darkness, coldness, and emptiness were all it was. But in terms of the age of the universe, it was equivalent to being born a few days ago. Following this, the universe would go through an even longer period of youth, adulthood, and old age, but that period of time was meaningless, because no life could participate in it. Our existence was but an extremely brief moment. It was the manifestation of entropy imbalance, the result of the universe needing to correct itself. The light in its body became dim and weak. We can't go anywhere. Chapter 1498. But you do not intend to head towards such an ending. Suddenly, another voice sounded. At the same time, two blobs of golden light appeared. They looked like eyes. Life has a common flaw. The further forward you go, the more you think of yourself as extraordinary. The faint light within the gray shadow no longer flickered. Instead, it stabilized. People no longer asked where to go next, but how to get there. It was no longer a question filled with various possibilities, but a goal. What binds this world is gravity. Civilization can only survive and continue because of it, but it also becomes the fundamental law of the universe, limiting the appearance of other possibilities. After a dwarf star evaporates, a small black hole will also be devoured by a large black hole. The scale of the latter will be calculated on the scale of a galaxy cluster. They are evenly scattered in every corner of the universe, and under the influence of gravity, they form a balance. Do you know what that looks like? A pile of small balls pressing down on a tablecloth. The gray shadow asked and answered itself. They are restraining each other, but they are helpless against the accelerated expansion of the universe until they evaporate and turn into nothingness. And when that happens, entropy will reach its peak. The universe will be calm and stable, and there will be no more changes. To it, that moment is when it finally becomes an adult. But that is not the outcome we wish to see. That's right, our existence is insignificant to the universe, like a drop in the ocean. Even without life, the universe is still the universe. Or rather, our appearance itself is a coincidence. But since we have appeared, we are destined not to remain silent. No matter how soft our voices are, we must let out a cry that belongs to us. The gray shadow flickered again. Just like how we escaped gravity and leaped from the ground to the sky, this time, we will once again break free of our cage and head for a brand new realm. And your method is to use gravity. The voice of the eyes was extremely calm, and it did not fluctuate because of the other party's words. That's right, gravity will cause space to cave in, and this is the only opportunity. When the small balls pressing down on the tablecloth are gathered at a point instead of being naturally distributed, gravity will definitely bring about a different change. It is the opposite of the increase in entropy. It is a man-made order, and also the unique mark of life. As the gravitational force grew stronger, the curvature of the nearby space would also gradually increase, just like a tablecloth being pressed down by a small ball. However, it would not continue to increase indefinitely. When it exceeded a certain limit, either the ball would become a new singularity and explode, or the universe would be torn apart. At this point, Roland seemed to hear the dull sound of a drum. It was the sound of the universe being beaten. The extremely distorted space would suddenly rebound after being pierced, and the vibration was strong enough to form a gravitational wave that could shake the world. This crack would become a new source of life. It was connected to the region outside the universe. No one knew what was on the other side, but at least the deathly still balance would no longer exist, and energy would continue to flow for a long time. This is the path we have chosen. And today, this was a brand new step in life. As the gray figure's voice landed, light suddenly burst out from its body, illuminating the entire space. The stars, galaxies, and nebulae were also revealed. The darkness instantly became rich, colorful, and beautiful. Then, Roland saw an even more inconceivable scene. Among the countless stars, there were even more fleets lined up. They were of different shapes and sizes, and some were even larger than stars. These unnatural creations were arranged in the form of a matrix, almost extending to the ends of one's vision. Looking at this magnificent scene, he felt an indescribable shock. There was no need to use any more words to describe it. This neatly arranged fleet in itself was a kind of order, representing the reduction of entropy. Only life would go against the essence of the universe, and only the body of a mayfly would challenge the vicissitudes of life. Or rather, to live was to go against the heavens. 176,425 civilizations had reached an agreement to work together to complete this unprecedented project. We will move hundreds of billions of galaxies and gather together 1/10,000th of the matter in the universe to create a man-made gravitational crack. Once successful, the direction of the world will be completely changed, and this project is Project Gateway. This plan is risky. The eyes reminded. On one side was risk, and on the other was eternal silence without hope. Was there a need to consider the choice? The light emitted by the gray shadow was gentle and firm. As I said, life will always be pretentious. However, just this alone is insufficient to complete Project Gateway. I need someone to coordinate the overall situation to allocate resources and various missions. Even after tens of millions of years, it will still be the same. I need your help to achieve this goal. Of course. The eyes blinked. I exist for this. The descent was extremely long. It was so long that Anna began to doubt her judgment. The sky above her head had already vanished. Even if she ignited a flame at her fingertips, it was unable to penetrate the endless darkness. The depth of the bottomless land exceeded her imagination. Anna even felt that she was passing through the core of the earth. The immense speed made her unable to hear anything other than the sound of the wind. If her guess was wrong, she would probably be reduced to a pancake the moment she hit the ground. The only fortunate thing was that the process wouldn't be painful. Before she could react, everything would be over. With this in mind, Anna could not help but hug Roland tighter. After an unknown period of time, she suddenly sensed that the whistling air currents by her cheeks were weakening. This change made her feel refreshed. A few minutes later, a faint light emitted from the abyss below. But soon, she confirmed that it wasn't an illusion. The light was turning clearer as she approached. And at that moment, she felt as though she had fallen into a layer of viscous air. The speed of her descent began to rapidly slow down, to the point of producing a sense of dizziness. And when Anna's feet touched the ground, her speed had returned to the instant of her descent. She did not experience much of an impact. Plop. A light sound came from behind her. Anna traced the sound in surprise and realized that it was Nightingale. "Why are you, this time, I won't hesitate or fall behind." Nightingale patted her pants and straightened her body. "Besides, how can I be at ease letting you act alone?" Clang. At this moment, the third sound of landing was heard. It was silent disaster. Ah. Nightingale immediately stood in front of Anna. Anna was a lot calmer. "Don't worry. She's here for the Nightmare Lord. I'm just abiding by the agreement." After saying that, Sarakas looked around. "It looks like you've guessed correctly. Yes, this is the true body of the realm of mind." Anna nodded. The place they were standing on was not rock or mud, but a metallic surface. It looked extremely smooth, and at the same time, it emitted rings of pure light. It was both solid and transparent, and it did not look like a creation of this world at all. Chapter 1499. Nightingale squatted down and touched the ground with her finger. When she raised her hand, both of them saw that her fingertips were clean, without a single speck of dust on them. This in itself indicated that it was unusual. If the Battle of Divine Will was repeated, the Radiation Tribe would definitely not be the first to attempt to explore the bottomless land. Regardless of whether it was a slip or a deliberate jump, there would definitely be traces left behind, not to mention the natural rolling pebbles and mud. Over the long years, this place remained brand new, so it could only be assumed that someone was constantly cleaning the bottom of the sinkhole. "Hey, Vendi, can you hear me?" Nightingale took out the sigil of listening, but there was no response. "No. It seems like we've exceeded the communication range." "Even if we haven't exceeded the range, it might not work," Sarakas said concisely. Sarakas said concisely. If God doesn't plan on letting anyone leave with the secret, it shouldn't be difficult for him to block all transmissions. All right. She shrugged. What should we do next? Anna stared at the bands of light on the ground for a long time before saying, "Don't you think that these lights are guiding us in the right direction?" They flickered rhythmically, like ripples spreading out from the soles of their feet and disappearing into the darkness. Apart from where the three of them were standing, there was no movement anywhere else, as though they were still in a deep sleep. Silent Disaster tried to take a few steps in the opposite direction, and the light moved along with her, but the direction remained the same. Looks like it. God's invitation. Interesting. Nightingale held the rifle in her hand. Let's go and take a look. The three of them followed the bands of light and slowly walked into the quiet cavern. About 10 minutes later, a bright entrance appeared before them. Compared to being unable to see their own fingers before, the rest of the journey was undoubtedly a relief. After all, no one liked to walk in a strange place shrouded in darkness and not knowing where the end was. Although they were still underground, at least they could see the path around them clearly. Is this really the realm of mind? Nightingale could not help but ask. Why do you say that? Anna turned around. Because it's related to consciousness. She scratched her head. Whether it's called the realm of mind or the origin of magic, it sounds like something illusory. But this place. It's as though it was created, Silent Disaster suddenly said. In this long passageway, whether it was the walls or the ground, they had nothing to do with the word illusory. They were hard, flat, angular, and pleasing to the eye. At the same time, these translucent metal blocks could also automatically emit light. Regardless of whether one was stepping on them or pressing them with their hands, they would still react. Moreover, the faster one pressed on them, the faster they would light up. Sometimes, some incomprehensible symbols would even jump out. They did not have the majesty and indifference of the god's domain that kept people 1,000 miles away. Perhaps the realm of mind was created. Anna's answer startled both of them. By people like you and me, or civilization. Nightingale swallowed her saliva. Isn't he a god? There's no conflict between the two. Anna shook her head. I heard from Roland that Lon called it a god because it's the easiest way for us to understand. Just like to ants, we are no different from gods. She could not help but shiver. That's a really disgusting way of saying it. Indeed. Silent Disaster surprisingly agreed. But I can understand. Just as Nightingale was about to say something, she suddenly realized that they had reached the end of the passageway. Did we go the wrong way? But soon, she heard a soft hissing sound. A beam of light quickly swept past the three of them, and then their appearances appeared on the wall at the end of the passageway. This change shocked even Anna. But before the three of them could react, the wall quietly turned into countless hexagons and disappeared. A huge ring-shaped space suddenly appeared in front of them. Its edge was a circular track, and the center was separated by a transparent, glass wall. Through the layer of glass, they could clearly see an astonishingly large sphere spinning below. And the sphere did not seem to be a physical object, but a fluid made of electricity and light. Countless lightning bolts shuttled up and down the wall, each one like a bolt of lightning that pierced through the sky. Even though there was only a layer of glass between them, the entire space was incomparably silent, as though the intense changes inside had nothing to do with the outside world. The three of them could not help but hold their breaths. Anyone who saw this scene would feel a heartfelt shock. No one could imagine that under a lone island in the sea, there would be such a magnificent creation hidden. What surprised them even more was that a floating tube-shaped object floated out from the wall and slowly flew in front of Anna. Then, it opened the cover. No matter how slow they were, the three of them already understood what it meant. Silent Disaster and Nightingale looked at Anna together, waiting for her to make a decision. And the latter stared at Roland for a long time before slowly releasing her hands. Under the guidance of Black Fire, Roland, whose eyes were tightly shut, was placed firmly into the tank. Then, the cover closed, and the tube-shaped object floated back to the wall and embedded itself in it, as though it had disappeared into the wall. "Did we succeed?" Nightingale muttered. "I don't know." Anna replied softly. "But at least we have accomplished our goal. All we can do now is wait." The darkness of the starry sky gradually faded, and white light filled their vision. In this infinite whiteness, a long staircase appeared beneath Roland's feet. This time, there were no snowflakes, nor was there a familiar ceiling. He looked at the other end of the path, and saw that the staircase was connected to a flat, empty space, and other than that, there was nothing else. So that's it, he finally understood why Lon said that when the erosion channel appeared, he would naturally feel it. The difference between the two worlds was so great that only a blind person would not be able to tell. According to Lon, there was a high chance that this was the divine domain, but he was unsure if it was Epsilon's astrolabe that provided the final expansion of the dream world, or if the expeditionary army had successfully completed its goal in reality that allowed him to arrive here. But it was meaningless to think about it now. Roland took a step towards the staircase. The journey wasn't long, and it didn't take long for him to reach the empty space. In the middle of the empty space was a unique throne, and a masked figure was sitting on it. The entire scene was extremely simple, a far cry from the divine domain he had imagined. Roland had previously imagined that God would create an extremely glorious and dignified hall to take him down a notch, but he never expected the other party to be so simple. He was momentarily at a loss as to what tone he should use to greet him. "You are God." In the end, he chose the most stable way to start the game. If the other party was an oracle or a guide, wouldn't he be making a fool of himself? "You can call me that, child." However, it immediately agreed. "But I prefer another way, omniscient custodian." Chapter 1500. Custodian. Roland pricked up his brows and said, "Is it to supervise every civilization's inevitable demise?" "I knew you would ask that, but there's no other way." The entity stood up from the throne and raised its right hand, causing a ball of light to appear in its hand. Following that, the ball of light began to unravel layer by layer, revealing its complicated internal structure until Roland recognized what it was. Even though he had expected it, his heart still skipped a beat when he saw the scene in front of him. Floating in the entity's hand was the world they were in. He saw the land of dawn, the fertile plains, as well as the kingdom of Greycastle. Beyond this continent, there was the Blackstone region and the Sky Sea realm, but that wasn't the main point. The main point was that the entire world was enveloped in a honeycomb-like shell, like a barrier that isolated the planet from the outside world. And beneath the continent and the sea, there was an extremely complicated core. It was not spherical like the Earth's core due to the pressure, but an irregular geometric body. The protruding part of the sea line happened to be on the edge of a cube. He could even see the bottom of the Maelstrom Sea connected to the Sky Sea realm, and the path was like a Klein bottle. Without a doubt, the reason why this world was so disharmonious was because it wasn't naturally formed. The artificial planet that he saw in the second scene was the real world today. The clouds, the sun, the moon, and the celestial bodies that people observed were all projections created by the barrier. And in the real outer space, all Roland saw was dead silence. "You are that pair of eyes." In an instant, he suddenly understood many problems. The god sighed softly. "I do not know what information you have obtained, but it doesn't matter. Time is a unit that can be long or short here. I will satisfy your curiosity, and then, destroy you." As expected of the words a custodian would say. It's just like how students don't need to attend classes or pharmaceutical companies don't produce drugs. Roland calmly spread out his hands. Regardless, he now represented humanity, or rather, all living beings in the real world. Even if the other party was a god, he could not admit defeat. "What I want to ask the most is, why is there a battle of divine will? What do you want?" "I thought you would start with a small problem." "Fine." It retracted the ball of light in its hand and raised one hand. Soon, countless screens appeared behind it, and together, they formed an eye-catching wall in this white and flawless space. Roland discovered that the contents displayed on the screen were all kinds of life forms. Project Gateway was a success. It was almost the same as the calculation. With the cooperation of many civilizations, this universe was finally torn apart by gravity, and an extremely tiny crack appeared. However, Project Gateway was also a failure. The influx of energy from another domain destroyed the vast majority of intelligent life, including the creator of Project Gateway. Is this the scene at the end of the third act? Roland recalled that extremely sad feeling again, as if he was connected to all the civilizations that had participated in the plan at that moment. That's right. This energy is what you call magic power. It is neither light nor heat, it is neither a particle nor a wave. To put it simply, it comes from a space that has completely different rules from the universe we are in. Physics and mathematics are meaningless in the face of such energy. Almost instantly, its influence changed the entire world. What is on the other side of the crack? Roland could not help but ask. An accurate description does not exist because no one has yet crossed that distorted membrane. However, according to analysis, there are basically two possibilities. One is the universe that envelopes our universe. This is also the easiest inference to understand. At this point, the voice of the other party became ethereal and ethereal. A new singularity can be born inside the universe and explode to form a new universe, producing a completely independent set of rules and constants. Therefore, even if our world originates from the universe outside the membrane, it does not mean that life or matter can pass through it unimpeded. The second possibility is the gap zone between the multiverse. You can think of it as a pot of thick soup, and we are the rising bubbles. It appears, expands, fuses, breaks. Of course, the truth is much more complicated, but that is already beyond the scope of your understanding. Alright, let's get back to magic power. The corner of Roland's mouth twitched. You previously said that it had destroyed most life forms, but now it has become the norm in the real world. Isn't this contradictory? If humans were the chosen ones of the universe, that would be too unbelievable. Magic power has a very unique set of rules. One of them is that it can be changed by consciousness, and at the same time, it can change the possessor of that consciousness. Roland was taken aback. What? The first batch of life forms that were changed were the participants of Project Gateway. Their structures were distorted and recombined, and after thousands of years of evolution, they finally became special crystal-like objects, which are the magic stones you use, God said calmly. I survived because I was not a life form, but I similarly suffered extremely heavy injuries. I spent tens of thousands of years to recover. It was also from then on that gravity was no longer the most revered force in this world. Upon hearing this answer, he was momentarily at a loss for words. However, Roland wasn't surprised that the custodian wasn't considered a life form. Project Gateway was a vast project that spanned hundreds of billions of galaxies and involved 170,000 civilizations. To walk on the correct path over such a long period of time, it was impossible for the coordinator to be a single life form or race. It had only appeared because of this project. Following that, the cradle was created. It was a world constructed using magic power, but the energy intensity was limited to a certain extent. I filtered out life forms from the incomplete database and began to nurture them again, allowing these species to be reborn under the new rules. As competition can greatly increase the evolution speed of a race, the cradle would deliberately choose species with similar habitats for symbiosis. However, the calculations soon discovered that this process would take an inestimable amount of time. Limited resources also restricted its free growth, so external interference became a last resort. Legacy shards, Roland said in a deep voice. That was only a part of it. The other party nodded. As for what I wanted to obtain in the end, it wasn't actually that complicated. The creator of Project Gateway, which is also the civilization that created me, did not only want the universe to live. It never planned on stopping its advance, even at the moment of its destruction. Opening the rift was only the first step. Its true goal was to see a domain that no one had ever set foot in before. It entrusted this mission to me, and my final mission was to create a civilization that could adapt to the rules of the two worlds. It paused for a moment. And this competition and evolution is what you call the battle of divine will. Bookseller's website. Chapter 1501. This time, Roland was silent for a long time. He looked at the tens of thousands of screens behind God. The living beings in them undoubtedly represented the countless cycles of reincarnation, and the fact that the battle of divine will was still ongoing meant that not a single species was able to live independently outside the barrier. It was not intentional that this world was named the Cradle. Even if it was filled with corpses and remains. Then what is the realm of mind? He asked after a long time. It is the key to maintaining evolution, and also the core of the cradle. God had no intention of hiding anything. Magic power is driven by consciousness, but it is not as simple as having one's wishes come true. After countless generations of evolution, it can gradually be used by life to a certain extent, and be converted into energy under the laws of this world. This also proves that the Creator's theory is correct, but there is a slight deviation in the method. A slight deviation. Roland fell silent. Probably no one would have thought that just by thinking, an action that could not be seen or touched, could achieve the true meaning of entropy reduction. This was probably the most inconceivable aspect of magic power. The use of magic power is still inseparable from methods and calculations, but it is not compatible with the mathematics and other laws of nature that we know. If I had not been changed by magic power, even understanding its laws would be an extravagant hope. He stretched out his finger and waved it, and the screens behind him immediately converged into one. On it, countless pillars of light shot into the sky, and after being refracted by the barrier, they converged in the bottomless land. Over the long years, the cradle discovered that even through the battle of divine will, species need to go through an extremely long period of growth and understanding, even if they were born in an environment of magic power. To speed up this process, the realm of mind took over a portion of the conversion work, so that they could quickly increase the amount of magic power they could use, and this magic power would in turn transform their bodies. So those pillars of light that are known as keys are actually pipes used to transmit data? Roland asked. Pipes isn't accurate, because they are the magic power of information itself. The realm of mind will complete the verification based on the user's request and expectations, and then transmit the results back. This allows species to grasp the method to control large amounts of magic power in an extremely short period of time, effectively shortening the growth period. So you know all the changes in the cradle, Roland said in a deep voice. That's right. This is also a necessary measure to ensure the normal operation of the system. So that's what happened. Some of his previous questions were finally answered at this moment. For example, why some witches' beams of light were obviously thicker than others, even if the former's ability did not seem to be very strong. That was because it had nothing to do with the power displayed, but only with the degree of complexity. At the same time, Andrea's accuracy and Momo's ability to see lifespan weren't abilities to predict the future and cause and effect. They were all built in a huge information network, the cradle monitoring the world's every movement. As long as the computing ability was powerful enough, uncertain factors such as chaos effects could be completely eliminated within the barrier. When the external conditions were 100% certain, the results would naturally come to light. To be able to reach such a level of technological attainment, he should say that it was no wonder that they were a civilization that wanted to make a move on the head of the universe. In that case, Dreamscape has already interfered with your plans? That's right. Not only does it occupy a large amount of resources, it also affects the stability of the core. You should have already noticed that the number of magic users in the world is decreasing. This is a sign that the realm of mind is overburdened. In order to prevent the structure of the cradle from collapsing, I have to restore it to its original state. At this point, God's tone had a hint of sadness. Child, look at what you've done. All the evolution information up until now will be lost, and everything will return to its original state. This pot was really a little too big for him to handle. The corner of Roland's mouth twitched. I don't understand. Since you can create the cradle, you must be able to control the entire realm of mind. Why didn't you destroy the dream world from the start? Because the evolution of life has infinite possibilities, even more so under the influence of magic power. God seemed to have already guessed that he would ask this question. I opened a portion of the realm of mind's resources to the various civilizations, which in itself means that I tacitly agreed to their right to explore the core. Artificial intervention and correction may miss the possibility of evolution. In order to ensure the diversity of the results, any additional intervention should be prohibited, unless it threatens the entire plan and the cradle itself. So it wasn't that God couldn't do it, but his hands and feet were bound by the basic rules he set. I think it's already too late to apologize now, right? It shook its head. From the moment you arrived here, it was already too late. But I don't think it's a mistake for life to resist the shackles placed on itself. Roland put away his playful expression and looked straight at God. Even if I had to do it again, I would still do the same. I can understand, because that's how you think you're extraordinary. Intelligent life invented logic, but rarely follows logic. This might be the reason why magic power resonates with you. It's better to have less mutual understanding. Speaking of which, this place is essentially a part of the realm of mind, right? Roland spread his hands and silently concentrated. Then, a dagger appeared out of thin air in his palm. Looks like I guessed correctly. Entering the divine domain isn't the key. After all, this is your domain, and recklessly barging in will only result in being easily destroyed. Only through erosion can you change the rules and truly threaten your existence. So you had this idea from the beginning? God pointed at Roland. Fine, although I can't approve of your actions, I will still give you sufficient respect. Other than letting you know everything, I can even give you a chance to resist, so that you can understand the gap between us. As soon as it finished speaking, Roland suddenly felt something being squeezed into his head. The intense swelling pain made him cry out involuntarily. Countless characters and formulas flashed before his eyes like a slideshow. The grand unification theory, superstring theory, multidimensional law, principles of all things, the knowledge that had troubled humans for a long time was now presented to him one by one. Not only that, he realized that he had completely understood the content, as if a brand new door had been opened to him. The realm of mind once recorded an unusual battle. If we call it the Battle of Souls, it's very suitable for the current situation. God slowly floated up. Right now, your brain is connected to the cradle's knowledge base, and the knowledge accumulated over thousands of years is freely available for you to use. Of course, if you want to give up, there's no problem. The world's recasting will not bring you any pain, and everything will happen in an instant. What are you talking about? Roland interrupted without hesitation. Since you've given me such an opportunity, how can I miss it? He raised his hand and waved, shattering the platform and stairs. The pure white background also disintegrated, revealing a pitch-black universe that shimmered with specks of light. Battleships appeared out of thin air, neatly arranged behind him, forming a vast array. It was the scene he had seen in Epsilon's memories. Under Roland's will, all sorts of weapon systems were aimed at God. When the thought of attacking surfaced, a dazzling beam of light instantly lit up the entire cosmos. Chapter 1502. The vast universe became the battlefield of this clash of consciousness. Countless stars were detonated by the weapons, emitting a white-hot radiance that resembled a supernova. The matter that was ejected spanned hundreds of light years, like the graffiti of a child's pen. The fleet was quickly annihilated under the attacks of the gods, and what followed was an even more violent weapon. If one were to say that the most common method he used during his battle with Zero was to set up defenses and then bombard indiscriminately, then there wasn't much of a change now. The only difference was that the explosives had been changed from gunpowder to something else. For example, the annihilation of matter and antimatter. When a body at the level of a galaxy was converted into energy, even the universe would tremble. A dull drum reverberated in the space filled with light and heat, and it spread outwards at the speed of light. In such an intense battlefield, carbon-based life forms were weaker than paper. Roland first forged himself into a body of powerful force, and finally transformed himself into a body of pure energy. He used the beyonder thoughts that were connected to the cradle to command the creations of his consciousness to do battle. It was different from the previous battle of souls. He didn't need to rack his brains. The knowledge vault had countless methods for him to use. The rapidly revolving thoughts made him feel indescribably carefree. And even if he died, he would instantly be vaporized by the energy jet, so he wouldn't feel any pain. In the beginning, he was still able to exchange blows with the other party, but when magic power was injected into the battlefield, Roland gradually fell into a passive state. And there was no way to recover from this disadvantage. This was also the first time he clearly understood how powerful magic power was. Be it witches or devils, the way they used it was to convert it into the inherent power of the universe. But in the hands of the custodian, it was completely free from the restraints of the laws. Its methods and effects couldn't be made up for with a greater amount of power. The hundreds and thousands of deaths caused Roland's mind to begin to slacken. If not for the cradle's help, he probably wouldn't have lasted until now. When he was reborn again, he no longer had the strength to support his body. The surrounding background had also returned to the pure white world from before. Roland swayed and fell to the ground. Only then did he realize that his back was drenched in sweat. In that case, you shouldn't have any regrets, right? The other party asked calmly. Clearly, this kind of battle did not cause much of a burden to it. In the realm of consciousness, it was indeed no different from a god. How is that possible? Roland took 2 deep breaths. Do you think I came here just to be beaten up by you? Your actions stem from ignorance and arrogance, which is part of the nature of life. Moreover, since things have come to this point, venting your anger won't help. It paused. But do you still want to continue fighting like that? In the face of an absolute gap, perseverance is meaningless. I thought you would be smarter. You mean the battle of souls? No. I never thought that victory would be decided so easily. Roland stood up slowly with his legs trembling from exhaustion. I just wanted to experience the feeling of who's calling for the fleet. To be honest, it's not bad enough. For the first time, the other party's tone fluctuated. Millions of years of accumulation were destroyed in a day, and you treat it as an insignificant game? I didn't say that. He forced a smile. It's just that before the final moment arrives, I want to ask you a question. Why did you do these things? Provide assistance in the cradle? I said that life has the right to choose, and every species born in the cradle is my child. I respect your choice and will. No, that's not what I'm asking. Roland shook his head. What I'm asking is, why did you do these? Lon. The god suddenly fell silent. After a while, it took off its mask, revealing the face hidden beneath. It was Lan's face. You've seen her. It stared at Roland for a moment before saying. I see. But you're wrong about one thing. This body is an image conjured to facilitate communication with humans. What you saw was indeed me, but I'm not her. That fellow, Epsilon, was right. The corners of Roland's mouth curled up. Just as the astrolabe bloomed and the white light engulfed his vision, she had said her final sentence. Although he had not seen her lips clearly, Epsilon had imprinted those words into his consciousness. That was the answer to his second question. I sensed His Excellency's aura from the traitorous oracle's body. I want to ask it, is this really the outcome it wants? In the beginning, Roland was unable to understand the connection between the information, but now, he had completely seen God's appearance. You are indeed not her, but only when the two of you are together will you be the complete omniscient custodian. Roland enunciated each and every word. It wasn't just Lon. Pure magic monsters, oracles, and the bottomless land's guardian were probably a part of it. Therefore, Epsilon had said that as long as God wasn't destroyed, it would exist forever. What was the omniscient custodian? It didn't matter if it was called a system, a machine, a program, Gaia, or an information synthesis thought body. Its original goal of creation was to supervise Project Door, as well as assist its creator in realizing the true goal of opening the door. But in the long and hopeless period of time, it had diverged. This divergence might have been one or two sporadic thoughts in the beginning, but with the passage of time, the thoughts gathered into a consciousness. They were born from within the custodian, and there was more than one. Lon was one of them. They were tired of the endless nurturing and observation, and they did not wish to be bound to this dead universe. Of course, there might be even more acute contradictions, such as resources. As long as it was a physical entity, there was bound to be losses. In that prosperous era of civilization, the custodian naturally did not need to worry about the problem of maintenance, but now, all intelligent life in the universe had withered. Not only could maintenance be done by themselves, the cradle also needed to split a large portion of the resources. If this continued, it was very likely that it would exceed a certain critical point, causing the entire system to collapse irreversibly. In Lan's words, regardless of the outcome, it's better than being trapped here forever. At least the future is filled with infinite possibilities. They will soon disappear with the reconstruction, along with you. God's tone remained calm. Roland wasn't surprised by this reaction. Without a doubt, if the traitorous oracles could resist the custodian's main body, they wouldn't need to seek him out. Perhaps, it controlled the cradle's underlying laws. But Lan's appearance isn't a coincidence. In another 10 million years, the same scene will probably happen again. Then, everything will return to square one. I have to complete the agreement with the Creator. This is an irrefutable law. It remained unmoved. Now, I'll begin the reconstruction of the world, is that so? Roland chuckled. That's not a wise move, because you have already completed the agreement.